Right now, a silent catastrophe is unfolding right beneath your feet, and it is about to completely wipe America's breadbasket off the map. Deep under the Great Plains lies the Ogallala Aquifer, a massive underground ocean that single-handedly sustains 1/5 of all U.S. cattle and grain, but it is running out of time. Across 8 massive states, the water tables are crashing at an unprecedented, terrifying rate. Parts of this vital lifeline are already functionally dead. This isn't a distant environmental warning for the next century. This is a countdown to empty grocery shelves and a total collapse of our food supply within our lifetimes. When the taps in the heartland finally run completely dry, how exactly will America feed itself? Imagine driving through the American Midwest and seeing nothing but miles of abandoned, cracked dirt, rusted-out irrigation rigs, and ghost towns swallowed by dust. Later in this video, we will look at the exact counties where the water has already vanished, exposing the terrifying reality that local authorities knew about for decades but chose to ignore. We'll uncover how powerful industrial agriculture giants kept pumping millions of gallons a day, even as the alarms began screaming. Why did they keep the truth hidden from the public until it was too late? The answer reveals a dangerous gamble with our national security and a ticking clock that is about to change life in America forever. To understand the sheer scale of this crisis, you have to look at places like Garden City, Kansas. Situated right in the heart of the High Plains, this region is home to millions of hard-working Americans who have built a multi-billion-dollar agricultural empire. For generations, farming families transformed this semi-arid prairie into one of the most productive agricultural hubs on the entire planet. When you picture this landscape, you think of thousands of lush, vibrant, green center-pivot irrigation fields, operating 24 hours a day, stretching all the way to the horizon. It looks like a permanent paradise of abundance. The people living here enjoy a classic American lifestyle, built on deep community roots, thriving livestock markets, and endless rows of corn, wheat, and soybeans. It's a place where the economy feels unstoppable and the soil seems endlessly fertile. But this entire green empire is a massive, dangerous illusion. Every single drop of prosperity you see at the surface is floating on a rapidly depleting clock. The thriving towns, the massive cattle feedlots, and the roaring tractors are all completely dependent on a hidden, ancient resource that is being sucked dry far faster than nature can ever replenish it. The residents go about their daily lives, completely unaware that the literal foundation of their entire existence is vanishing right beneath them. The invisible source of all this wealth is the Ogallala Aquifer, a staggering prehistoric underground water deposit that spans over 174,000 square miles beneath 8 states. It holds water left behind by melting glaciers from the last ice age. But recent data from NASA's GRACE satellite mission has revealed a devastating truth. By measuring minute changes in Earth's gravity, these satellites have documented a massive, catastrophic loss of groundwater mass across the entire region. We are pumping out an ancient, finite resource that took hundreds of thousands of years to accumulate, and we are burning through it in a matter of mere decades. The natural recharge rate for this aquifer is agonizingly slow, often amounting to just a fraction of an inch per year. Yet, modern industrial wells are pulling out hundreds of gallons every single minute. It is the ultimate geological bank heist, and the vault is running empty. Despite the overwhelming satellite and scientific data, the average consumer walking through a local grocery store has absolutely no idea. They buy meat, dairy, and bread without realizing that the supply chains behind these products are tethered to a dying resource. The threat isn't that the water might get low. The threat is that once this fossil water is gone, it is gone forever. The warning signs were never a secret. They were documented decades ago. The crisis truly began in the post-Dust Bowl era of the 1950s, when high-powered turbine pumps were first introduced to the Great Plains. Suddenly, farmers could tap deep into the earth, pulling up unprecedented amounts of water. For a while, it seemed like a miracle, but by the 1970s, the honeymoon was already over. Seismographs and hydrographs managed by the United States Geological Survey started showing alarming trends. The water table wasn't just fluctuating with the seasons. It was consistently dropping year after year with zero recovery. Early hydrogeologists and independent environmental scientists stepped forward to sound the alarm. They published rigorous papers demonstrating that extraction rates in critical zones exceeded natural rainfall recharge by up to 10 times. They explicitly warned that if industrial pumping continued at this exponential rate, major sections of the aquifer would become unusable by the early 21st century. The data was clear, precise, and terrifying. Yet, these urgent warnings were actively brushed aside. Powerful industrial agriculture lobbyists, major corporate farm executives, and local politicians chose to prioritize short-term economic growth over long-term survival. Acknowledging the depletion would mean enforcing strict regulations, capping water use, and lowering crop yields, which would damage land values and stall banking loans. So the scientific reports were filed away in government cabinets, the public was reassured that the water supply was virtually limitless, and the massive pumping operations continued to expand without interruption. The warnings were completely ignored by the very people trusted to protect the region's future. Because those warnings were buried, the predictable disaster arrived right on schedule. By the early 2000s and 2010s, localized groundwater depletions began to violently tear through the Texas Panhandle and western Kansas. It started quietly, with the sound of pumps sputtering. Then, thousands of domestic and agricultural wells ran completely dry. Multi-million-dollar farming operations, built on the assumption of endless water, watched their underground supply vanish in a single season, leaving their massive capital investments entirely worthless. The human toll of this ecological collapse has been devastating. Multi-generational farming families have been forced to stand on their porches and watch their livelihoods turn to dust. Husbands and wives have faced the agonizing reality of auctioning off land that their grandfathers settled and bled for, selling it for pennies on the dollar because a farm without water is just a desert. The emotional trauma in these collapsing rural communities is palpable, marked by skyrocketing stress, financial ruin, and a profound sense of betrayal. The physical speed of this disaster is shocking. Once flowing Kansas creeks and vibrant riverbeds, which had supported diverse ecosystems and local communities for centuries, have completely turned into dry, barren sandbars. The vegetation has died off, and the soil has begun to shift in the wind, echoing the dark days of the 1930s. This isn't a hypothetical scenario about the future. The destruction has already claimed entire communities, leaving behind a trail of economic ruin and broken lives across the heartland. As the wells began to dry up, a massive cover-up took shape behind closed doors. Water district managers and corporate farm executives knew the exact depletion rates decades ago, yet they actively chose to manipulate public data. To keep local economies from panicking, they altered maps and tweaked saturated thickness statistics. They did this to maintain artificially high land values, ensuring that local banks would keep lending millions of dollars to doomed agricultural ventures. State regulatory agencies completely failed the public. Out of fear of political backlash from wealthy agricultural empires, they refused to implement mandatory pumping caps until wide stretches of the aquifer were already destroyed. But the most shocking fact of all is that American taxpayers were corporate accomplices. Federal agricultural subsidies consistently rewarded farmers for planting water-intensive crops like corn and alfalfa in the middle of a semi-arid desert. Government programs effectively funded the rapid destruction of our own national food security. That brings us to the present day, where the crisis has escalated into an active emergency. Current real-time monitoring from NASA and the USGS shows that the water table has plummeted by over 100 feet in critical agricultural zones. Today's severe megadroughts and rising global temperatures are perfectly matching the worst-case models predicted by climatologists years ago. The buffer zone is gone. We are now living out the disaster in real time. If you walk out into the fields today, the crisis isn't hidden in a chart, it is deafening. You can hear the physical sound of massive irrigation pumps sucking air, vibrating violently as they bring up heavy mud and coarse sediment instead of clean water. This grit destroys expensive machinery, signaling that the well has reached the literal bottom of the aquifer. In response, state geological surveys are currently engaged in a frantic, desperate mapping effort. They are no longer measuring for sustainability. They are trying to pinpoint the exact death dates for individual counties. Hydrogeologists are drawing lines on maps indicating which communities have 5 years of water left and which have only 2. The clock is ticking down to 0, and the modern infrastructure of the American heartland is rapidly running out of road. Leading hydrologists from Kansas State University and the USGS have issued a stark, unwavering verdict. They emphasize that the Ogallala is a fossil water resource. Because the thick clay layers above it block rapid drainage, it would take over 6,000 years of consistent rainfall to naturally refill what we have destroyed in less than a century. A landmark study by the National Academy of Sciences explicitly outlines the vulnerability of our current groundwater management. Their models predict a total, permanent economic collapse for the High Plains region within the next few decades if current trends are not halted immediately. The experts aren't debating if the collapse will happen anymore. They are actively tracking the final stages of a dying system. When the aquifer hits total collapse, over 10 million people living in the heartland will face immediate catastrophic destabilization. The multi-billion-dollar beef cattle industry will vanish almost overnight, as there will be no water for livestock and no corn to feed them. Global supply chains will instantly fracture, causing food prices at your local grocery store to skyrocket beyond recognition. The crisis will quickly move past agriculture. Hundreds of heartland towns will watch their municipal water supplies fail entirely, creating a massive human migration crisis as millions are forced to flee the region. The most devastating consequence will be the permanent return of a localized, modern dust bowl, locking the center of America into a state of perpetual environmental ruin. The chilling reality we must all face is that once the Ogallala Aquifer is gone, it is gone forever in our lifetimes. There is no backup plan, no pipeline big enough, and no miracle technology that can save us. The heartland is steadily turning back into a desert, and the ticking clock beneath the soil is directly tied to the food on your dinner table. Where will America turn for water when the taps completely stop? The answers are terrifying, and the crisis is spreading to other vital regions quicker than you think. In our next video, we will expose another massive hidden water emergency that is quietly threatening a completely different part of the country. Please share this video right now to wake people up to where their food actually comes from before the taps turn off permanently. Subscribe to join the front lines of forensic disaster analysis and track the critical survival crises that mainstream media completely ignores. Stay informed, stay prepared, and click the next video to see the collapsing Colorado River Basin.